It is 4 p.m. We're bringing developing news.
And the stories behind the headlines. This is Storycon. I'm Regina Lay.
I'm Ed Lingao. Some stories for watching this Holy Wednesday, April 16. VP Sara Duterte was the only top official to receive majority support according to Pulse Asia's March 2025 survey. Her approval rating rose to 59% from 52% in February, while her trust score reached 61%. Meantime, President Bongbong Marcos suffered a 17-point drop in his approval rating that settled at 25%, while 54% expressed distrust towards him. The Pulse Asia survey was conducted from March 23 to 29 among 2,400 respondents.
The National Bureau of Investigation, or NBI, recommended the filing of sedition and cyber libel charges against former presidential spokesman Harry Roque and vlogger Claire Contreras, otherwise known as Maharlika. That's over a video allegedly showing President Marcos using cocaine. The NBI also filed separate charges against PDP senatorial bet Raul Lambino and Duterte Youth Chairman Ronald Cardema. That's for allegedly spreading false claims that the Supreme Court issued a TRO against the ICC arrest warrant for former President Rodrigo Duterte. President Marcos has signed into law the extension of Meralco's franchise until 2053. The Power Distributors Chair, Manuel Pangilinan, said the renewal will support long-term energy projects to improve service delivery and to sustain economic growth. Meralco has already proposed a 215.36 billion capex plan for 2026 to 2029 to boost network capacity, upgrade systems, and support government infrastructure initiatives. And just a quick disclaimer, TV5 is also chaired by Manny Pangilinan.
And Pag-asa warns of dangerous heat index levels this Holy Week, particularly today and tomorrow, Monday, Thursday. Heat indexes in UP, Los Baños, Laguna could soar up to 50 degrees Celsius, while San Ildefonso, Bulacan may get 47 degrees Celsius. Others expected to experience 43 to 44 degrees Celsius of feels-like temperatures include Tarlac, Cavite, Batangas, Isabela, and Aurora. Everybody is urged to stay hydrated and avoid direct sun exposure and watch for signs of health-related illnesses. And joining us perhaps later on will be Storycon's resident political pundit, Tito Ronald Llamas.
Well, he's running a bit late kasi maraming ganap.
Hindi, ang balita ko meron siyang dinner. 12 sila.
Okay. Tapos, siya yung sacrificial.
Hindi.
Siya yung may dalang
May dalang pilak.
Okay.
Kuha ka ganyan.
Ikaw.
Ito si Ami, kuha kayo ni Ami yun.
Si Ami busy
From Philippine
because...
Star, Editor-in-Chief, Ami Pamintuan.
Hi.
Hi, Ami.
Happy Wednesday. Holiday mode na ng mga tao.
Wala
nang tao sa kalye. Hindi pwede na traffic si Ronald na.
Holiday mood na, pero meron pang one big news na humahol. Before we...
It had to be today, di ba?
Laki, no? Laki ng tinaas. Ang laki ng binaba.
It had to be today. So, there is
may accompanying survey ang Pulse Asia, of course.
So,
yung satisfaction over, malaki yung ang taas nung sa almost 80%, 79% disapprove of the way the administration is handling inflation.
So there's no beating around the bush. So to recap for our viewers, this is the administration of Bongbong Marcos has suffered a major decline in approval ratings. So for Marcos, he went from at the moment 25% na lang yung approval. 25?
Down by 25, down by 17 points.
Malaki.
From 42 down by 17 percentage points. So 25% approve of his performance.
February was 42.
53% disapprove of his performance.
Disapprove.
That
Ang
means
laki. Malaki yung disapprove, malaki yung tinas.
majority now disapprove of his performance. Undecided is about 22%.
So 2 out of 4 disapprove, 1 out of 4 approve.
So for VP Sara naman, we're looking at approval ratings of 59%.
Down by 7 points.
Down, that's from the February
No,
survey. Sorry, correct.
Up by 7
Up
points.
by 7 points, and then disapproval
52.
niya is down to 16% for this
Team
quarter.
trust niyan, taas-taas, 61.
Yeah.
Trust rating, napakataas.
So yeah, that's trust rating. This one is approval ratings. For Senate President Cheese Escudero and
Down.
Senate President Cheese Escudero also saw approval ratings declining. 39% na lang siya ngayon, whereas his disapproval is at 18%. And for House Speaker Martin Romualdez, approval is only at 14%, which is very, very low. And disapproval is now at 54%, which is also a majority, which we can safely say a majority of Filipinos disapprove of his performance.
That's down from 17, yung kay Martin. Mababa na nung February, lalo pang bumaba ngayon. Pero yun ang sabi ko, baka nga related dun sa isa pang survey na mababa yung rating ng administration in dealing with inflation, corruption, and yung pagtaas ng sweldo. Yan.
Yes.
Well, yun nga, inflation, disapproval over government's actions over inflation,
Laki.
79%. Disapproval over graft.
79%.
Disapproval
Tapos sa
over efforts
corruption,
against graft is 53%. Over poverty is 48%.
48%. Saka yung mabababang sahod daw,
Improving
gano'n,
pay,
same.
48%. So, big numbers there for disapproval.
Pero laki, no?
Yes, it's
Although usually, pag midterms, di ba, talagang bumabagsak yung mga,
yes,
yung mga ratings ng mga presidente.
but it's in this is highly unusual kasi 1 month
pretty
lang,
high, yeah.
1 month lang since the last survey, and it's not usual to see declines of this much. So sorry, recap ko lang. Trust for President Marcos is at 25%, so
Same.
more or less the same
25,
as yung
same.
approval. That's down from 42% in February. For
Yes.
VP Sara, trust is at 61%. That's up from 53% last month. For Senate President Cheese Escudero, trust is 38%, down from 47% in the previous month. And for House Speaker Martin Romualdez, trust is at 14%, down from 18% in February. So it mirrors the results of the approval ratings findings. Okay, let's now bring into this discussion right away Pulse Asia Research President Ronald Holmes. Welcome back to Storycon. Ronald, we just spoke to you a few days, pero ito nga, we have another big news on our hands.
Good afternoon, Ami, Reg, and Doc Ed. Wala pa yung heckler.
Wala pa, sir.
Wala pa
Mamaya,
isa.
habol siya. Pero wait, before...
Nagtatanong yung heckler kasi hindi mo raw tinimbre sa amin to last week.
That's true, no? Last week, a few days lang ago, kinausap natin.
Joke lang.
But again, let's talk about the provenance first and foremost. Sino yung nag-commission ito? May nag-commission ba ng survey na to? And if not, tell us about how you conducted the survey. Because of course, there's always questions around yung provision of any kind of survey. So talk us through that first.
Yeah, so this is the same survey we've been conducting since 1999. It's a quarterly survey. We call it Ulat ng Bayan. We follow a multi-stage probability sampling, so random selection of cities, municipalities, then the barangays, the sample spot, and eventually the respondent in the household. These are face-to-face interviews, and there are 2,400 respondents across the nation.
Okay, so may nag-commission po?
None.
Okay.
It's our own quarterly survey, regularly conducted since 1999.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Okay, sir.
Professor, yung tanong namin, medyo significant yung pagbagsak ng numbers ni President Marcos, and of course, inevitably, ang tanong ng mga tao, kasi nangyari to during that time na pinadala around the time, no, after na, there was a lot of complaints from the other side na yun na nga, pinadala daw, kinidnap daw si President Duterte. And related ba yung issue yun dito? Kasi nakita namin, we have another survey showing na ang mga disapproval over gut issues inflation, jobs, di ba? Poverty, and of course, nadagdag yung corruption. May relation kaya dyan yung kasi umakyat din naman yung ratings ni VP Sara na at around the time also, meron ding controversy over impeachment. May impact ba yun dyan?
Yeah, may impact definitely. May yung mga kaganapan, the events that transpired prior to the survey. The chief is the arrest of the former president and his swift dispatch to The Hague. So definitely that has an impact in terms of yung approval and trust ratings of both the president and the vice president. And then additionally, as you mentioned, yung appreciation of the national administration's performance in addressing the most urgent concerns. We have been tracking this for the last 25 years. And, it's under this administration that we saw for the first time, I think it was still September 2023, when this approval in terms of the attending to high prices of commodities hit about 70%. So since September 2023, nasa 73 na ang disapproving. So yung 79 na nakikita mo ngayon, basically it continues from what we had registered almost 2 years ago. So in a sense, there's really declining appreciation of the national administration, and eventually who will be held accountable for the performance of the national administration? The buck stops with the president, right? Now, how do we explain Sara Duterte's increase? There's a 7 percentage point increase in terms of approval, and there's, I think, an 8% percentage point increase in terms of trust. One is that I don't think she's being held accountable for the national administration's performance because she has dissociated herself from the administration since last year. The second one is that, the delay in the impeachment case basically relieved her of any responsibility to address all of the concerns and issues raised against her in the prior months. In a sense, the delayed trial of the impeachment case helped her. At the same time, how they framed the arrest of the former president as a kidnapping, a narrative that we know has been reported even by Reuters, massive disinformation. That would have really also changed the perception of the public with regard to the value of the arrest of the former president.
But I also noticed, sir, yung dun sa most urgent national concerns ninyo, these are basically policy and economic issues. Wala namang sa urgent national concerns, wala namang issues that have to do, for example, with the ICC or with impeachment and all that. Of course, I don't know how one would put it here. Pero yun nga so I suppose talaga hindi siya magre-reflect dito sa urgent concerns at magre-reflect lang dito, for example, would be something like inflation.
But there are two governance issues, Ed. Yung governance issue na nag-top 5 since last February will be fighting criminality.
Yes, sir.
And fighting graft and corruption, which Ami pointed out. Yung fighting criminality was not in the top 5 in the December survey. It rose to the top 5 in February, and we see it also as a concern about 1 out of 3 Filipinos. Whether this is an indication of, how the narrative of the Dutertes again, that crime is back, peace and order conditions have worsened compared to their administration. We can take it as such, partly, and it might be a perception. That's why recently the Philippine National Police and the Presidential Communications Office said, for example, one kidnapping. That's not really make it appear that the peace and order condition has deteriorated. So. Yes, the ICC issue is not one of the concerns because this is a time series. We
Yes, sir.
basically cover the same concerns across our surveys. Hiwalay yung ICC. Unfortunately, that is not one of the concerns that we assess the national administration on.
So that's what I was also wondering. But how do we reconcile this with the other survey that said majority of Filipinos want Duterte held accountable for the killings during the war on drugs? 60, of course, it's a different survey, I know. Pero parang doesn't this go against that finding or hindi?
Reg, I would not say. I mean, one is that I don't know what the methodology of the survey is, but granting that that's the sentiment on the part of the public, to be held accountable does not contradict this the data that we get here, because accountability means basically allowing the president to answer for the charges that have been leveled against
not
him.
necessarily
And to
ICC.
and to afford him the right to due process. And the tale that is being woven and spun by the Duterte camp is that he has been denied due process. So in a sense, whatever has an impact on the public opinion may actually have percolated across the time from the time of the arrest. So the accountability is there. I think I would assume, and I hope it is true, and I would agree with that particular perspective, that anyone who has been charged of crimes against humanity should be held accountable, should be afforded due process. And I would go with that 61%. But the way that it is being characterized by the Duterte camp, kidnapping yan eh. It's such an extrajudicial rendition, which actually, legally speaking, is not the case. And I'm not a learned, I'm not a learned individual. No?
That word again.
May isa pang tanong ngayon, Professor, dahil ang laki nga ng binagsak ng numbers ng mga administration officials, anong impact kaya niyan? Will it have an impact on the midterm elections, yung resulta?
Well, meron siguro, but I would take the midterm elections separately, no? Because the thing with regard to the midterm elections is that you have basically more than 60 people, 11 in the alliance, 10 in the PDP and their guest candidates, and then you have a number of independents. You have people from Bayan Muna. So they are campaigning on their own. And you've seen already people voting out and doing their own separate campaigns. No? So in a sense, they're selling themselves independent of how the public would perceive the administration. Ang hindi natin nakikita, and which the survey would not be able to measure, would be the machineries that both administration and any party for that matter will be using and operating leading up to the elections and on election day. Will the government pour its resources, continue to pour its resources to convince people to elect members of the alliance? On the other hand, would the other alliances, the Duterte and the independents, have the resources also to go across the country, talk to local politicians, secure the support of local politicians, make sure that the local politicians will carry them and that they would be able to command votes on the part of their constituency? That machinery is something that we will see operating, as I said, leading up to the elections and probably up to election day.
Sir, sa income levels naman, I'm looking at the income level numbers eh. Of course, we have A, B, C, D, and E. Ang pinakamalaking bagsak ni BBM is sa Class D, down by 18 percentage points. Ang pinakamalaki niyang pag-akyat ng disapproval rating is also from income D, 23 percentage points. What do you think is the reason for that? Inflation pa rin?
Well, and that's the largest socioeconomic class.
Okay.
Based on our estimation, that's about 75% of the total population. So, kaya wherever Class D goes, that's what you will see at the national level. So, kaya makikita mo, Ed, na pag bumaba siya ng 18 points sa Class D, ay bababa siya ng halos kaparehong puntos doon sa pambansang level, o antas.
Okay.
So, maraming dahilan dyan, kasama na yung mataas na presyo ng mga bilihin. Prior to the survey, the Philippine Statistics Authority, if I'm not mistaken, mentioned that we hit the highest unemployment rate in the previous month. Nag-ease yung inflation, pero hindi ibig sabihin pag nag-ease inflation, bumaba presyo ng mga bilihin, di ba? Ibig sabihin na bumagal lang
ang pag-akyat.
Pero nandun pa rin siya, di ba? Nagtakda ang gobyerno na 45 pesos na ang maximum retail price ng bigas. Pero 45 pesos pa rin. No? Malayo pa rin sa pinangakong 20 piso.
Sir, sa island groups naman, I'm looking at VP's disapproval rating sa Mindanao, 1%. Have you ever seen anybody with that kind of disapproval rating? Ganyan kababa?
And it's quite surprising actually. Well, it's not surprising. It's really something that we have not seen in the past. But especially when we were discussing the senatorial preferences last time, when I tried to when we broke down the senatorial preference, we saw that in Region 11, the top 10 candidates were all from PDP.
11 is
And that's a
11 ba is
double
double area?
region.
Okay,
Double
double region.
region. So that means na ganun kalakas ang hold nila in Mindanao. As I mentioned then, na-activate yung kanilang supporters eh. So
Yeah.
in a sense, that's the effect of the arrest. The arrest and how they characterize the arrest as something that is a kidnapping, as a violation of due process. Suddenly, they became human rights advocates.
Yeah.
Has struck a chord on the part of their supporters, and their supporters are now basically expressing or re-articulating their support for
Yeah.
the Dutertes and those who are associated with them.
And their approval rating even now is at 96%.
Yep, and and that's where you see decline in terms of where the president has a single-digit plus rating. Also
Yeah,
Mindanao.
5%.
Put it into context for us, no? Kasi itong latest survey that you guys released, it only compares it with the February survey. But help us put Marcos's approval ratings into context. May nakita na po kayo ganito kababa for a president halfway through his term? Because it's pretty low at 25% approval ratings.
Dapat ang tinatanong natin dyan si Ami at si Ed kasi mas na-observe na nila.
Kaya nga nabanggit ko na kanina, di ba, Professor?
Si GMA,
Yeah.
si GMA
Yes.
midterm 2007 had a
Yes.
decline, less than majority approval, less than majority trust. But the difference between GMA and BBM now, closer to the midterms, is that GMA had lower majority approval and trust, but her disapproval and distrust rating were not majority.
No, that's what I mean. So nakita ka na ng ganito numbers during GMA's time, but was it as low as 25%? And then the other context.
Yep. Yes.
I think si GMA went below zero, no?
Hindi, if you net, it was negative, but we don't net because
Yeah,
may
nag-negative
undecided.
siya.
May undecided kasi Ami so hindi namin ninenet. Pero ang pinamababa ni GMA, kung di ko nagkakamali, was closer to the end of her term, parang 10 lang ang approval niya. Pero kung midterm ang pag-uusapan, ay halos pareho na itong kay Bongbong na 25. Pero ang kaibahan nga, yung disapproval at distrust, parang nahati yung publiko ng midterm ni GMA. One out of four are, approving or trusting. Karamihan ay undecided at meron kang isa sa tatlo na disapproving and distrusting. Kay BBM, lumalabas kayo na mayorya ang hindi nag-aaproba at mayorya ang hindi nagtitiwala.
Pero Professor, normal yung di ba? Kasi you've been conducting this survey since several administrations na eh. Talagang pag midterms, di ba, talagang medyo bumabagsak yung administration eh. And sometimes, more often than not, nagre-recover. Yun yung natatandaan kong trend eh. Tama ba yun? Yun na natatandaan kong trend sa mga presidente natin eh.
Hindi siya...
Babagsak siya ng midterm, tapos yung iba bumabalik, yung iba hindi naman.
Hindi siya gaanong bumubulusok. Bumababa siya marginally. Pero tama ka, Ami, bumabalik. Kunyari, kung ikukumpara natin kay the late Pinoy and even kay Digong,
Even
bumaba,
Digong,
pero,
yes.
But it was marginal. It was not that
Hindi
high.
ganyan kalaki. Hindi ganyan kalaki.
And they were scoring, I think Pinoy was about close to 70 midterm.
Consistent siya.
And Digong was about close to 80. I cannot recall the figures, but I think that simply suggests that even if there was a dip in their rating, at midterm, people were still appreciative of their work and still trusting of those presidents, which is again differentiates BBM and GMA during their midterm.
Pero in this case, you're saying, nag-combine ngayon yung disaffection yung mga kritiko ng administration with their dissatisfaction with the way the government is handling that issue. So, nagkasama siya.
Nagsama, sana na gano'n na, nag-snowball na eh. Tapos nandagdagan pa ng political turbulence. So, and that political turbulence that definitely doesn't in any way help addressing, because government's attention would be directed towards something else.
Political
Right?
turbulence.
So
I like it.
it becomes, to a certain extent, the patronage is there in order to try
Yes.
to assuage people na may ginagawa kami. Pero hindi yun yung makabuluhan eh. Hindi yun yung masustansya, substantive
Yung hinahanap ng tao.
response sa ganito mga problema.
Sir, may phone-in question kami from one of our producers, si Paul Padua. Okay, eto ang tanong niya. Pwede ba mag-phone in? Wait, hindi yun. Paano mataas ang satisfaction rating matagal nang hindi nagpe-perform ng function si VP Sara? Wala namang susukatin. Ano yung tanong? Are you satisfied with the performance and what performance?
Ang tanong rito ay kung sila talagang aprobado, hindi masabi ko aprobado o hindi aprobado. Hindi aprobado o lubusang hindi aprobado sa pagganap ng tungkulin ng Vice Presidente. Ngayon, tama, no? Ano bang ginawa niya? So it's an impression.
His impression niya.
In a sense, when you ask people,
they're not
are you
naman asked
approving
to
or
justify their
disapproving of the Vice
impressions, eh.
President? It's really their perception, their impression of what the Vice President has done. If we were the ones to be asked, then we will tally whatever she has done or failed to do.
Yes, sir.
But on the part of the public, to a great significant extent, these national officials are far removed from their daily experience. And eventually, as all vice presidents in the past, with the exception, I think, of Vice President Lenny, because Vice President Lenny was attacked and harassed by the president, most vice presidents really enjoyed higher approval and trust in the president because they're spare tire, they're not being held accountable. The back doesn't stop with them.
Yeah. Prof, what's the story with Senate President Cheese Escudero? Because his numbers mirror that of the president's, no? So recap ko lang, approval niya for March is at 39%. Bumaba from the February number, which was at 47%. And then disapproval niya also rose to 18% from 12% in the previous month. So we're also seeing significant moves in the wrong direction for the Senate President. How do we interpret this?
Well, senators, when they become Senate President, we always see a decline in terms of their approval and trust because they're being held accountable for the institutions. They're either commended or held accountable for the institution's accomplishments or failures. And this is what you see in the case of Senate President Chis Escudero. Maybe the accountability here is with regard to their position with regard to the impeachment case. People who feel that the impeachment case should be given importance would definitely not be approving or trusting of the Senate President. People who feel that the impeachment should be delayed would be basically happy that it has been delayed. And those are the people who might be supportive of, let's say, for example, the Vice President, who is the subject of that impeachment case.
Is it what's the word? Is it usual that he's being seen as a proxy for the president then? Or is it normal that his numbers are moving in the same direction as Marcos's?
Yeah, the numbers of the Senate President are more volatile. Sabi nga, remember si dating Senate President Enrile, at one point when his performance rating went beyond a majority, his response to a comment, congratulations, sabi niya, parang ice cream yan eh. Madaling matunaw. So, in that sense, it should not be associated with the performance rating of the president because we're dealing with the question here. We ask people, yung pagganap ng tungkulin bilang presidente, bilang vice-presidente, bilang pangulo ng Senado o presidente ng Senado. We don't know whether people understand what are the functions of the president, vice president, senate president, or the speaker of the house. Baka nga pagkakaintindi ng speaker of the house, tagapagsalita ng pangulo. Which is not too far from reality, no?
Well,
but,
technically hindi
but
dapat, pero
that is not the function of the Speaker of the
Yes.
House, of course. But that's the impression people. That's the perception that they have, and Senate presidents in the past have always been, for example, Chis Escudero, as senator, enjoyed high performance ratings as senator. But as Senate President, what the ratings that we're seeing right now are basically half of what he enjoyed at the
Yes.
peak, no, or
Oo.
even less than half of his approval rating as a senator.
Sir, request ko lang.
Professor, balikan ko lang yung tanong ko, no, yun sa election, yung impact sa election. Nakakahawa kaya yung pagbagsak na yan ng approval rating ng presidente sa mga kandidato niya?
Well,
Kasi nung GMA, nung bumabagsak yung ano niya, yung ratings niya, ang ano sa kanya, kiss of death daw yung ano niya. Ayaw na nga niya mag-endorse later Kasi baka daw matalo.
well, yun yung mangyayari. Maaaring ma-influensyahan. Pero maraming mga kandidato. Kasi nga, ang problema rito, yung alyansa na ito is an alliance of parties. Ami, nung panahon ni GMA, although alliance siya, tandaan ko ang pangalan ng parang Team Unity ba? Yung kay GMA.
Yes.
Tapos Grand Opposition ba? Yung Grand Alliance. Ayokong buuin kasi may pejorative act nun na ginagamit nun. Di ba yung Team Unity, Team Unity of Team Administration at saka yung Grand Alliance of the Genuine Opposition. Don't spell it out. Anyway, I'll spell it out. But those are different arrangements. No? Now it's an alliance of parties. So that means if you belong to the NPC, actually you might be campaigning within the alliance, but you have your own party. And that party has local candidates that can support them in terms of generating support. So in that sense, some candidates are insulated from whatever befalls the national administration or the president. Other candidates will definitely be much more affected. Others are going to be less affected. And right now, you're seeing a change in terms of the strategies of candidates on the part of the administration slate.
But sir, is it also possible na kasi some would say na medyo nagbago yung nagbago yung presentasyon ng dalawang panig in the last month For example, magmula nung the survey was taken 21, di ba? March 21 or 23, thereabouts.
23 to 20.
That was around the time na si VP Sara was giving interviews from The Hague. And her presentation then was of somebody, a daughter who was malumanay, mabait, madaling kausap, at nakikihalubilo dun sa mga supporters niya. Versus yung, for example, yung presentation niya late last year.
Even this year, after she was impeached.
Oo, yung nakikipag-away siya, the Gurgur thing and the assassination allegations, and yung ipapatapon sa West Philippine Sea and all that. That's on her side. On the other side man, you have Malacanang apparently also changing its tone. Now you have Claire Castro swinging left and right versus before na medyo, di ba, medyo before parang averse to conflict yung presidente. Ngayon, he has a spokesman who's on the warpath with everybody.
Palaban.
May epekto kaya yan doon sa mga numbers?
Yeah. Yan yung pag-aaral natin. Kasi yung image na yan, may epekto talaga yan sa pananaw ng publiko. Biglang nagbago ang behavior ng vice-presidente. Nabaltaan ko nga kahit dun sa Hong Kong, ang kanyang speech ay kakaiba dun sa pangkaraniwang speech. Hindi siya masyadong parang combative. So on the other hand, as you said, and sometimes I've watched the presidential communications
press officer, yeah.
Press officer, not spokesperson. Very reactive, and in that sense, does it help the administration? So, and that's one area that really has to be studied, because if the vice president has suddenly been a calming presence, and then acting like a concerned daughter, would that draw more sympathy?
And the underdog.
Yeah, so...
Tapos yan pa their ads that came out this week, si Amy tsaka si Sara, parang lukot-lukot ng mga mukha. Although wala pa sa survey yun.
Nagluluksa nga.
Nagluluksa yun. Siyempre, di mo capture yung survey yun.
hindi ko masabi kung ano may magiging epekto ng pagluluksa. Pero kung kasi dating pag nagluluksa ka, mas nakakakuha ka ng simpatya kung sa tunay na buhay. Pero sa politika, hindi ko alam kung lalo na sa eleksyon. Maaaring may positibo, maaaring negatibo epekto. Tingnan natin, lalo-lalo na particular doon sa in-endorse nung nagluluksa.
Sa in-endorse. Okay. Okay, ano Bok? Meron pa habol?
We're being told, marami pa, but we're being told to wrap. And then, sorry, I guess the pahabol is yung, hindi natin masyado na dissect yung kay House Speaker Martin Romualdez, no? To be fair, he's never rated highly in the approval and trust ratings, right? So this time around, nasa 14% lang siya for approval and 54% for disapproval. Again, he hasn't spoken publicly about the ICC case. As far as we know, he's been silent this whole time. But yun nga, it ties back to what you were saying, that he's being seen as a spokesperson for the president. Ito ba yun?
Not necessarily him, but if you ask people what is the role of a House Speaker, I'm pretty sure that they will say, tagapagsalta. Nino, hindi natin alam kasi speaker di ba? And then if you track the approval and trust ratings of speakers in the past, there's greater indecision than approval or disapproval. Because remember, the House Speaker represents a district, a small unit. But he assumes a national position as Speaker, and his awareness with regard to the Speaker is definitely high within the district, but nationally, hindi ganun kataas. Ang natatandaan ko ng Speaker na majority ang approval ay si Speaker Belmonte, but that was at the time, I think, right after Erap's impeachment. Ang isa pang speaker na parang mataas ang approval ay si Alan Peter Cayetano. Pero dala niya kasi galing sa Senado Di ba? May national prominence na
Oo.
So he cannot, and most speakers don't get there's more ambivalence as to whether they're trustworthy or they can appreciate their work, because yun nga, knowledge about the speaker is low because they're district representatives.
May mga issues din of understanding the role. Okay, we'll leave that there. Thank you so much for joining Storycon and for your insights today. Pulse Asia Research President Ronald Holmes.
Thank you, sir.
Maraming salamat.
Thank you.
You're watching Storycon on One News. We just need to take a very quick break. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
This is the Story Conference Group, or the Storycon Group.
We've got developing news and the stories behind the headlines. Welcome back to Storycon, the Story Conference. I'm Ed Lingao.
And I'm Regina Lay, still with us. Ami Pamintuan of the Philippine Star. And wala pa rin si Ronald. Hindi na umabot.
Sabi nga si Ronald Llamas, meron siyang dinner ngayong gabi.
Last supper.
With 12 other people. At may dala
Yun, the last supper ba yun?
Meron siyang last supper. Si Ronald yung traidor in that scenario.
Di sabi na.
Sino yung traidor?
Pang tip niya sa waiter. Kaya talaga ko. Tito Ronald, okay ka lang dyan. Ami, ano headlines niya for tomorrow?
Well, walang yung mga preparation na magde-deploy daw ng maraming police, magmo-monitor yung mga driver ng mga lahat ng klaseng sasakyan, babantayan daw yung mga reckless driving ng LTO, babantayan mabuti dahil napakarami nating aksidente. At sabi ng PNP, they will be deploying more police dahil nga daw dyan sa nagrereklamo na yung mga rami ng grupo nagrereklamo yung kidnapping. They will deploy daw to Binondo and other areas na maraming foreigner na who might be targeted for kidnapping. All over the Philippines yun. Ewan ko kung saan i-deploy yun. Saka yan ang mga binabantayan. So, of course, yung heat index. Painit ng painit. Gabi,
Up to 50,
50, Los
degrees
Baños.
Celsius.
Yes,
Sa
sobra,
Bulacan,
Los Baños.
sa Bulacan din. 50 degrees, grabe. 43 to 44 sa Tarlac, Cavite, Batangas, Isabela, and Aurora.
Pero masarap sa ganyang init,
nag-initiate na nung yung disqualification kay yung candidate sa Pasig na nag-issue ng mga lewd remarks.
Si Sia.
Attorney-
yung COMELEC, si Christian Sia, pinailan ng disqualification case ng COMELEC.
That's what the COMELEC Chair George Garcia said to us yesterday, di ba? Sinulong na nila yung
Naitutuluyan.
disqualification case.
Tutuluyan siya.
And there should be a decision on that. I don't know.
Maghintay pa tayo ng reaction ni Harry Roque doon sa kasong final sa kanya ng National Bureau of Investigation. Yung inciting to sedition.
Sedition, yes. And,
Inciting to sedition.
tapos si Harry naglabas ng bidyong sumasayaw-sayaw siya ni Maharlika.
Kasama niya si Maharlika doon sa... Si Maharlika may dagdag na yung forgery. Forgery kasi siya daw nagkalat ng
ng
forgery
video.
ng video.
Yung supposed
Siya
full
daw yung
video.
nag-repost siya nag-repost. Siya yung nag-repost ng video.
Well,
At saka meron pang isang case na hindi ko masyado maintindihan yun. Yung isang kasong pinail sa kanya na similar to dun sa pinail kay Cardema. Na related to cyber libel.
false news.
Fake news. Yun ba yun?
Similar to tingnan mo, may definition siya sa revised penal code.
Yeah.
Hindi kasama si Harry.
False news. I remember that is Article 1.
Yung isa, yung forgery, yung isa, cyber libel. Meron din silang inciting to sedition. Saka yung isa, na revised penal code yung kinokot.
Yeah,
Oo,
I
and
remember that.
And also,
Naghihintay pa tayo ng mga reaction nila ngayon.
naghintay din tayo ng reaction from the team of senatorial candidate Raul Lambino.
Ambino, yes.
Oo, nabigyan din siya ng
Yan. Yung report nga na, hindi ba yan, sabi ko nga na, nagkalito-lito mga tao dahil sabi nila, may TRO.
Yes. Oo.
Kasi kumalat
siya
siya
yung nakasuhan. Kasi siya yung nagsabi na
Yes.
may TRO na before Digong was whisked off to the plane.
That's Article 154 ng Revised Penal Code. The spreading of fake news is a crime. Pero medyo dangerous kasi yung application ng article na ito . It's not a general article against the spread of fake news. It's specific .
Hindi ako pamilyar sa kanya.
Any person who, by means of, blah, 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 printing, lithography, shall publish or cause to be published as news any false news which may endanger the public order. or cause damage to the interest and credit of the state. That's bagay. That can be interpreted any which way.
Oh, yun yung ano dun sa TRO
Hindi na naman
yun,
tayo sa
ano.
legal interpretations eh.
Oh.
But
Any lawyer can argue any which way.
exactly, any angle of it, any lawyer can
So,
argue.
in other words,
But-
if you say something that turns out to be untrue, you can go to you can be liable for arresto mayor and a fine of 40,000 pesos. Ano ba arresto mayor? 6 months?
Hindi ko
Imprisonment?
alam. Saka yung isang case related to the cyber libel law, ha? Yung ibang cases na final, related na sa cyber libel law.
And then,
Remember, sabi ng Malacanang,
6 months
kapag
arresto mayor.
ang sabi ni
6
Claire
months.
Castro, hindi daw magfa-file si President Marcos ng cyber libel in relation to the Pulburon video. Pero sabi naman ng NBI, sila daw yung in charge sa ganyang mga kaso na apektado ang presidente and the vice president. Kaya pwedeng sila ang mag-pursue ng case related to cyber libel.
People in the
Kaya
Philippines.
sila yung
So,
nagpa-file.
he was
na related to the
distancing-
Pulburon.
So he was distancing himself from the NBI effort. Speaking of Yusek Castro, she was supposed to, we were talking about this during the break, she was supposed to hold a press conference pala today. I don't know if natuloy, mukhang hindi eh. Do you know, Ami? Mukhang hindi,
Wala pang ano sa amin.
Oo.
Baka maya-maya.
mukhang hindi natuloy eh. And I wonder now whether, you know, they're...
Normally in the morning yan, di ba?
Yes. Yeah.
Normally, 11 yung kanilang mga briefing sa Malacanang.
Oo, so I'm being told
Wala
by
po.
our director na hindi natuloy. And now I'm very curious bakit hindi natuloy. I'm guessing they're, you know, scrambling to field a response to this survey result. Kasi medyo drastic nga yung decline. So yun, we're waiting on a response from Malacanang on this latest
Yeah.
Pulse Asia survey.
The two surveys, pati yung ano, yung sa issues.
Oo, the
Yung
issues-based
issues
survey.
related.
Oo. Hindi na rin naman surprise yun because for a long time now, controlling inflation was the number one
Yes.
issue for voters.
Always.
Pero
Saka jobs. Although yung corruption, medyo mataas, medyo yun ang medyo surprising, yung corruption.
tumaas din.
Yung
53%?
53% disapproval eh.
But
Sa graph.
pero these are the standard issues that everybody asking the surveys. But of course, is that really the reason why the numbers went up or down?
Yun na nga, di ba, yun ang tinatanong ko kay ano. Ano bang dahilan kung bakit ganon?
Well, he says parang it was a perfect storm.
Combined.
Confluence of events.
It was a confluence of events. So ito na nga,
Yeah.
the economic issues have not been addressed. People don't feel it. Tapos dadagdagan pa ng political turbulence. So that was Professor Ronald Holmes' explanation for the dismal numbers
Yeah.
for the administration.
What I'm saying lang is the numbers, the issues are not always reflected in the surveys kasi there are things that you cannot ask naman. For example, you can just put in there na, do you approve or disapprove the arrest?
Yeah.
Or do you...
Pero yung mga events, when the surveys are taken, yun ang may impact, di ba?
Yeah.
Eh, yung period na kinuha yan, that was
2 weeks
over a
after,
week
no? 2 weeks
after the arrest of
the
Duterte.
departure for the Hague, and so every day
2
andun
weeks.
yung interviews with the lawyer, with Harry Roque, with VP Sara, and everyday news from the Duterte camp.
And yun nga, like you pointed out, yung positioning nila at that time was here is a daughter who is
Malumanay,
agreed under this
The underdog.
under duress kasi nga yung tatay dinala sa ICC. Yun nga, the positioning around that was was a stark departure from how she positioned herself in the previous
fighting
months.
fighting from in the previous months.
Yeah.
Hmm.
We will see.
Kaya
Yeah.
tingnan natin kung ano mangyari kasi medyo nagsisettle down ngayon. Tingnan natin.
Oo nga eh. And then also, 3 weeks to go before the
Yeah.
consequential midterm election. So we'll see.
Wala natang
Yes.
survey, no? Between now and
Wala na.
Wala na survey.
Ito na yata yung last...
Wala na.
So
Pero meron, ano na lang sila, mag-exit poll na lang sila.
Exit
nun.
poll, iba naman yun.
But the numbers will tell the story. But for now, we'll leave that there. Thank you so much for joining Storycon today. Ami Pamintuan, Editor-in-Chief of the Philippine Star.
And in spirit.
in spirit. Holy Spirit.
Tito Ronald Llamas, who is about to have dinner. The
Or
supper.
is
supper.
busy talking about the survey too. We're off tomorrow and Friday, don't forget, for the Holy Week break. But we'll see you again on Monday, 4 p.m. for Storycon. I'm Regina Lay.
I'm Ed Lingao. We are One News, all sides, all the time.
This is the Story Conference Group or the Storycon Group.